Welcome to the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil
and Renee, where amazing things happen. Our goal is to help build, repair, and restore healthy relationships.
Our primary focus is on the marriage relationship. However, the topics are applicable to the relationships that we value most. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Welcome to the other side of Season 1. This is Season 2 with the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee. And we had the amazing honor of sitting down with some amazing friends of ours, DR.Paul and Lisa Hoffman. And we're going to be sharing some time with them, not in our closet.
But at the table.
Yeah, but at the table, because Paul is way too tall to be in our closet.
And this is a little bit different format. We're going to be calling it our love story now. And so this is going to be an interesting story. We hope you enjoy it.
And also for all of our friends who live all over the country, we told you last year, we're coming for you this year. We're just trying to give you time to get ready and understand that our most valuable resource is not our money, it's our time and it's our relationships. Our stories matter. And I hope that as you guys hear the stories of all these amazing, brave men and women, that you would be brave too and share your story with all of the world.
So coming up on episode 32 of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee, let's go to their story or love story.
Paul and Lisa, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
It is a pleasure to be here.
And just for full disclosure, we go to church together, and there's a lot of couples and a lot of people at our church. And Renee and Lisa serve together on the team, and we wanted to just start out with where you're at. You know, sometimes you can. We've talked to other people all over the place, all over the country already, and we have some awesome people right here and in our own community
that we touch every Sunday.
Absolutely. And so that's what we really wanted to start out with on this show. And we welcome you again and thank you again. So we want to jump right into this episode. And why don't you guys tell our listeners a little bit about
your love story?
You want to take this?
Yes. This is a classic line. Our love story begins with a concussion.
Oh, wow.
Nobody's seen that one.
No one. That may be a new one. Lisa and I met in the Air Force. We were stationed at Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. We met 4th of July in 1996 at a mutual friend's 4th of July party. Mm-hmm. So I walked in, and she maintains that the second she saw me, she knew she was going to marry me. I was a bit of a fixer-upper, so I think that that vision came from the Lord rather than anything I was doing. But we got to talking throughout the day and engaged in a game of touch football where she ran into the jaw of a friend of ours, cracked his tooth, and she had a concussion.
Wow.
And apparently I must have looked good. Because about a week later we started hanging out, became friends, and then because we were lieutenants, I was doing some stuff for work, and I was completely clueless as she kept coming by the house offering to cook dinner. Aww. I was so focused on my job. Eventually, a good friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, pretty much smacked me upside the head with a 2x4 and said, "Hey, dummy, this girl likes you. Maybe you should call her up and ask her out." Wow. So we did that, July 30th, 1996. Went to Olive Garden for dinner.
We did. And then we went walking.
Took a walk
after dinner
along the green belt in Boise, Idaho, along the river, and walking became the main focus for our relationship.
Was that walking a part of the recovery from the concussion?
I think so. She was a little woozy, kind of weaving back and forth. I thought it was my animal magnetism. It turns out it was some form of trauma.
I did, now that I think about it, I did fall sound asleep in the car on the way back. It could have been a post-reaction of the concussion.
Probably.
That is a symptom of severe head trauma.
Or my personality.
But you looked really good before and after the concussion. I'll say that.
Yeah, so that was us, and it was one of those things where, and we've talked to our daughter about this and our son about this, and they've said, "Well, how did you know?" And the answer that we give Grace is, "Honey, we just did." Mm-hmm. So we met in July, went on our first date end of July. We were engaged by Christmas of that year, Christmas '96, when we were both really sick from pneumonia and flus and that sort of thing.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
There's a pattern. I didn't recognize that.
That's really good.
This just story came out.
And then I deployed to Saudi Arabia in January '97. We did the wedding planning while I was in Saudi. Got back and we were married in August.
Yeah, flew to New York and literally high-fived and flew to New York and got married and went on our honeymoon and then redeployed right after we got back from our honeymoon. Wow. So it was a whirlwind, but as you know, being military, you have to make sure you have the correct papers or else they weren't going to station us together. So we had to make sure we were, but no, we knew. And we weren't, full disclosure, we were not Christian at the time. So that journey became much later in our marriage. And I just am very thankful that the Lord knew we were supposed to be together. But it definitely made the beginning part of the relationship very challenging because we were both very strong personalities.
That would be a nice way of putting it, yeah.
Very strong personalities, trying to come up with both our own careers and figure out how do you navigate that as a couple. And it was challenging. We were deployed a lot those first couple of years.
I think a lot of people don't realize being in the military is challenging enough just because of the separations and the deployments, and you're in and out so often that sometimes you don't have that time to really establish a strong relationship with each other, and even just listening to your story, I think about, and your military story probably compares to people that in the past that they didn't make it. They got married at a quick age or early age or a short engagement period, and for whatever reason they didn't make it. What would you say helped you guys make it?
To put it in one word, walking.
Wow.
That has been the cornerstone and foundation of our relationship.
Elaborate on that one.
Since we were engaged, since we were dating and then engaged and then married, every night we would go for a walk after dinner. Usually about 3 miles, so it gave us an hour to focus on each other. What had happened during the day, what was going on in our lives, hopes, dreams, fears, things we were anxious about, and it was a protected communication time. And later on, as we became Christian in our walk with the Lord, we read that Paul walked everywhere, and that's where he did his discipleship, his mentoring, his teaching. We didn't know that. We came to Christ a lot later.
Right.
A decade into our relationship, a decade into our marriage, and that's been an amazing journey. But walking from the beginning has just been the foundation of what we do and who we are.
Wow.
Things don't feel right if we're not communicating regularly.
And I think that's the thing that I hear is the communication. The walking is the way that's how it's initiated, but the way that it's really been cultivated is, like you said, it's a protected time of communication. And so I think that, listening to your story, how important would you say, could you do the walking if you weren't talking? Or would you if you had to choose between the walking and the talking, which could you give up?
We have had times when we'd have to give up the walking, but the communication stays there. That's there. But I've noticed when we got busy with things at work or things were going on.
And the kids were young. That was tough.
Yeah, that was tough because we couldn't bundle up our children and take them out
in Alaska.
That was living in Alaska and walking was kind of awkward 8 months out of the year.
Wow.
Right.
But we still had that foundation to go back to.
Right.
But the open communication that we've always had it's the cornerstone of our relationship.
And I think there's something powerful walking because you're side by side. So when you have a conversation across the table from each other, there automatically becomes some resistance and a barrier. But side by side, you're walking in the same direction, solving the problem together.
Right.
And I think that, honestly, every issue, every major challenge we have had in our marriage, in life, or navigating anything has been solved on a walk.
Wow.
And we've even had a point where we'll be having a very intense discussion about something, and Paul will go, "That next light, this ends."
Right.
We will we will argue about this till that light, and then it's done.
Right.
And we move on. And I think that is honestly what we have done our entire marriage.
Yeah. Our subdivision, our neighborhood that we live in has a 2-mile loop.
Okay.
So we walk down the hill, which is half a mile, walk around the loop, and then walk back. So it's 3 miles, and it's about an hour.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's amazing how many things get solved during that time.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we always talk about is that in order for conflicts to be resolved, there has to be a designated time that you set aside without distractions to really address it. And so for those of you who are listening, if you are having a hard time establishing some new habits with it being the beginning of the year, try starting to walk with your spouse, because that could be a new habit that you can incorporate that could teach you how to focus on the problem communicate and set a time when you can have the conflict, but then also setting a time when you have to end the conflict. I think that's a great tip for people to really begin to implement.
And when our kids were younger, we would go on date nights, and our date night was walking. Yeah. So we'd have a babysitter come over, or the parents come over, or drop the kids off somewhere just so we could get a walk in. Yeah. And we noticed that when we were so stressed out, we would look at each other and say, gosh, we haven't been for a walk in a couple days. Right. We really need to take that time and do it. So I encourage everybody. I mean, even there were very challenging seasons of life where walking literally in Alaska was very hard, but we still found that time to sit side by side in a car and just have a conversation. Right.
And I love what you're saying, because that's something that everyone can afford to do, and it's something that everyone can do physically. So I think that's a great jewel, a great gem that you can invest in the next generation, because we do live in a very tech-driven society, and so it seems very primitive to just walk, but it could be something that could be making a big difference in your relationship. Sure. Like just walking and talking.
It's so precious to be able to take an hour where you don't have a screen or a watch or something going off in front of you and focus on the person next to you.
Yes.
Right. And it's priceless.
Right.
You can't put a value on that sort of thing, especially these days.
And we have 2 teenagers now who are used to us going out for walks, but it's interesting that whenever, especially our daughter, whenever she needs to work something out, she'll go, can we go for a walk? Yeah. And I just walk and listen to her, and she will work it out in that time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, but it's a protected time, like you said. We're not in front of a TV. There's no distractions. And by the time we get home, she goes, Mom, thank you. I feel better.
Yeah. Because you're physically because medically, walking, doing something physical helps your brain. Absolutely. It helps you to release endorphins. It helps you to, release cortisol. So it really does not just physically help you, it helps you spiritually, and it helps you relationally. Mm-hmm. And that's what we need to really begin to, especially with this being a new part of the year. So that's a great thing to kind of share with people.
One step at a time.
One of the things that I thought about while you guys were talking and just listening to you is, you mentioned earlier that you came later to Christ in your relationship, so that means you probably had a time of being 2 single individuals, not with the Christian aspect, but just being 2 single individuals. What would you say has been something that you've learned from not only being single and married now, going from being single to being married, but being Christian later at this, almost like it sounds like at a latter time in your marriage, the differences? What could you share with us on the differences between being married, being married non-Christian, and then coming together in Christ and married?
Sure. The biggest thing that I've noticed, and we were baptized in February 2008. Okay. So we were married
11 years.
Yeah, August 97. Trying to do the math. I am not good at it.
It's okay.
We had been married 11 years, and we had felt the presence of God in our lives. Mm-hmm. We had been in and out of church as kids, as adults. We recognized that there was a place for faith, especially by the time our son was born. We knew that we wanted to give him a tradition to grow up in, and that was important to us. But in terms of really knowing the Lord, that didn't come until 2008. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing that I noticed was trying to do it under your own power. And we see this at church. We hear this in our sermon messages, at church in our teachings. Life is so much better when you're not doing it on your own. When you can turn your troubles over to our Heavenly Father, that just makes everything easier. And it takes away the doubt, the uncertainty, a lot of the issues that we face in relationships where, I'm worried about what this person thinks, I'm worried about what my wife thinks, what my kids think, what our parents think. So you know what? All of that can go to the side. And there is a peace, a relaxation, and a freedom that comes with that. It's not easy every day,
right.
But it is better. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that is the biggest change that we have seen in our lives. It's better. Mm-hmm. Our marriage is better. Our relationships are better.
Well, we were out of order. So the first 11 years, our household was out of order. Mm-hmm. Wow. And which is funny because I was a professional organizer for many years. So the house was very clean and things were in their place, but relationally our house was out of order. And until God became the head of our household and everything was ordered underneath him, honestly, that tension, the frustration, the stress we're handling it, we're carrying it all on our own. And we've grown now since that time to learn to hand it off to the Lord. Right. And it's taken our relationship definitely to the next level.
Absolutely.
We communicate better, we fight better, we do everything.
Yeah. And I love that you say that, because when you are married, you're still going to have disagreements.
Absolutely.
Sure.
We talked about that in the other episode. It's not, the only bad conflicts are the ones that are unresolved. And I love when you say that you guys, walk and you talk through it. What are some of the things that something you would tell yourself, your younger self, that you would tell your younger self right now? What would be something that you would, if you would have known, you would have done different?
Calm down. It's not that important to have an argument about that.
Definitely to relax.
Relax.
Well, the first thing is, okay, get right with the Lord.
Yeah.
Get that relationship in order, because that's the basis for changing everything.
Right.
From there, in a more worldly side, relax. Yeah. I had a reputation for getting wrapped around the axle and excited about whatever is going on at work. Okay, that I thrive under stress, I thrive under pressure, I thrive under deadlines. Looking back, no, I don't.
Right.
And allowing those things to have power over my life was detrimental to everything. Mm-hmm. Okay, you don't need to bring your work home and be mad at the cat, be mad about dinner, be upset with the kids.
You were mad about dinner?
Just once.
Just checking.
I think it was the stir fry.
Too many veggies. My bad. Yeah, it was definitely, we were both striving for worldly recognition, for promotion, for just achievement. I mean, we were workaholics. Constantly felt like you were going to have a heart attack. The stress was so high because we were trying to handle it in our own strength. Right. And that has been the best, just looking back just over the last even 5 years, realizing that when you can hand it off every morning, every day, just hand it over to the Lord and understand that He is sovereign and can take care of it and handle it in a much better way than we can. That has been the best blessing of becoming. And I think, I wish, I'm glad our kids have grown up being Christian, but I really like that we came to Christ as a mature adult, because I think knowing that contrast of what life was like without Him, right, compared to life, we wouldn't have made the mistakes we made.
Right, sure.
So I'm glad the kids have that.
Right.
But coming to Christ as in our 30s, recognizing that, wow, we had to surrender it all. Right. And that contrast was so huge that I think it's really shaped a lot of what we do now and how we raise our kids, especially. Sure,
and I think the conscious setting aside of other people's priorities, of the priorities of work, the priorities of that your friends put on you, that your peers put on you, setting that aside and being able to put it down, look at it and go, is this of value? Is this something that I want to continue to invest in? Is this something that I need to be doing? To come to that in your mid-30s and look at it and be able to put something down and go, I don't want to do that anymore. Right. That's not who I want to be. Right. That's not my identity. Is invaluable. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things that when you're on the other side of it, you understand it. Before you get to that point, it is very difficult to conceive of what your life could be, what your relationships could be, without the power of the Lord in your life. Right.
Well, and I laid down my whole career. So I got out as a non-Christian from the Air Force and became a full-time mom, had no idea what I was doing, had no idea what it meant to be a wife, because I had my own career for a long time, and had no identity in Christ at that point, didn't have any identity in the Air Force anymore, and so we had to really re-examine who we were, and growing in that relationship with the Lord was precious. And I'm thankful for that, though it was a really challenging growth. Growth always hurts, right? So
one of the things you guys have mentioned is identity. I want to ask you guys both, what is a practical way someone who's listening to this podcast who might be 15 or maybe 20, what's a practical way for you to begin to kind of carve out what your identity would it come, what's the source of it, and how do you begin to live it out?
That's a good question.
Wow, that is a great question, Renee.
You want to take this one?
It should be easier considering we have we have an almost 18-year-old and an almost 16-year-old at home. The piece of advice I would give them is to consider whose you are. I've heard Lisa say this to our daughter and our son a lot. Consider whose you are, who you belong to, and who he wants you to be. Because it's so difficult growing up in this world. I mean, we're in our late 40s. And the way the world has changed from when we were growing up in the 70s and 80s, it's unrecognizable.
Right.
It is.
The pressures, the influences, the pervasive reach of social media, you're always confronted with information about people wanting you to do things, be things, how you should be, and how you should act. The best piece of advice I could give is set those aside and look for truth. And where does truth come from? Look at the Word. Go to church, talk to your friends, people whose counsel you trust. Who do you want to be?
Right.
And go from there, rather than accepting what you see on television or what the world tells you to be. Once you know, when you have that as a root of identity, things are going to be good. They're not always going to be easy.
Right.
And, we're never promised that life is easy.
No.
And it hasn't been.
No.
But it is good. And knowing where we came from, and knowing where our identity comes from, if you can figure that out early in life, you're going to have such an advantage in every aspect.
And that's one of our other non-negotiables in our family is family dinner time.
Okay.
And that is a requirement. I am the chief menu officer. Make sure that as the CMO of the house that the family all eats together, one meal a day. But we have those identity conversations at dinner because there's no devices, there's no worldly influence, and we have to be grounded in our relationship together and our relationship with Christ in order to raise kids, because it's scary. It is really scary what they're being exposed to. And so we've taken the position of having those very real conversations around the dinner table and being honest with them and being transparent, because they're going to hear it from somebody else and we want it to be from us first. So that's another non-negotiable that we started very young with raising kids is dinner time is mandatory.
Right.
Yeah.
And those traditions are so important that you establish, and even not just with your children, but even in your relationships. And you guys, in our pre-talk before we even started recording, you guys were talking about your do you call it a vision trip or a reprioritizing trip that you do at the end of the year, or at the end of the year where you kind of reconnect or you reestablishing things or kind of refocus? How has that impacted your relationship as husband and wife?
Well, think about this though. We have set goals. We used to keep them on our refrigerator.
We did.
Every year from the day we got married, we would have our individual goals and our us goals.
Yep.
I mean, it was the same 10 pounds weight loss every year, so I just repurposed that.
And we have repurposed that 10 pounds at least 20 times.
Right.
But we did that as a couple. We would sit down. I didn't even remember that we had done that.
That's right.
And we would sit down and do that every year. We kind of went away from it, I think, as the busyness of the new year came. The last 5 years, we really haven't had a chance because of a lot of things that have been on our plate to really even breathe. Right. So this year, we were intentional about it. We went away and really spent hours and hours and hours looking at our priorities, our focus areas. And what we learned from it is now, as we go into this new year, we can say no to things that don't fall into those priorities or focus areas for this year. And that feels good.
Yeah, and I had noticed in our work lives, it's very easy to start the year flat. Okay, we hit January 1st and it's time to figure out what 2020 is going to look like. Taking a week to say at the end of December to go, this is what we've done in the year. We had some significant life changes this year. I retired from the military after 24 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Nice to be on the other side of that one too. I finished a PhD.
Oh, wow.
My dissertation is done. So yeah, to say that was a small source of conflict in the relationship would be, that'd be like the number one source. And Lisa lost her mom. She went to be with Jesus in July.
Wow.
And after being a caregiver and seeing that in our family, there was a lot of stuff going on.
A lot of changes.
Absolutely.
And losses and gains.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So we needed to slow down and say, take stock, what happened this year? What do we want the future to look like? And 2020 is relatively young, but it feels different.
Good.
It feels different already because, as Lisa said, we can think about what our priorities are and what we want to say no to. Does X add value to your life or to your relationships?
Right.
And if it does, great. If it doesn't, maybe not reject it outright, but think about it. Do you need to be spending that amount of time on this thing that doesn't advance you or get you closer to what you want your goals to be?
And help you grow. I think that's our focus this year, is to grow closer to the Lord, grow closer together as a family, grow in many, even our physical well-being. It's very important to us. And so it's been really helpful just sitting down and going, does that fall into that growth of where we want to be? And does it have an eternal purpose, or, have a higher purpose than just, I have to say yes because I say yes to everything, and that's difficult.
It is, and you said something that was really instrumental in what you just described. I love the way you said us time. A lot of couples don't think about it in that capacity. They have a lot of individual things that they're doing, whether it's schooling or hobbies, or whether it's video games or sports or whatever. How important would you say it is in a relationship that you not only have a us time, but you mentioned it at the very beginning of our episode of walking together and reconnecting? That's a real great form of reconnecting. What is something else that you can help other people to establish some good, healthy practices to help really kind of solidify that us time? And how important is it really in a relationship, would you say?
Well, we're a team. And so we do everything together as a team. So when one is burdened or stressed, the other one picks up the slack.
Right.
And it comes in chores, it comes in errands, it comes in doing meal prep, everything. So we work together and have that conversation so we know where each other's at, so that one's not flailing.
Sure.
And so that's, the main source of tension, right? Is you're trying to get something done and you can't. And so your spouse is sitting on the computer completely ignoring you as you're running around the house like crazy. And so, okay.
That was old.
That was hot.
I've never seen that happen in the house before. I've never seen that happen in the last 6 hours.
This is a truth podcast. Right? We're speaking only truth.
But he did say the last 6 hours.
I've been pretty good since noon.
Yeah.
But trying to be transparent and saying, look, we need to figure this out together. Right. And even just relationally, you have to have your alone time. You have to be established together as a couple, because we have 2 teenagers. They're gone in 3 years.
Yes.
And we have more to do in this world than we've done in the last 18 years raising them. And so we've told the kids are very well aware that they are not our number one priority.
Yeah, they can't be.
It's the Lord, it's us, and then it's the kids.
Yes.
And they know.
And could you please say that again? Because I think that women really struggle with that. It's God, it's your marriage, and then it's your children.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. And as a strong-willed woman, the biggest challenge I had was to take covering under my husband, because I thought, I don't need him. I mean, I can do it on my own.
Right.
I can make my own money. I'm self-sufficient. And when, like I mentioned before, our house was out of order, when we put the order in and I fell under my husband's authority, didn't become a weak, or my strength was still there, but it was much. I tell you what, I love it. I can sleep better at night.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask.
I don't have to worry. He's got it.
Yeah.
And I think that was a huge deal for me as a professional woman with a career, with goals, and being very focused, was to submit to my husband's authority. And when I did that, everything changed.
Yeah.
Right.
Everything changed.
Give me an example, because people hear the word submission and they think of it as like it's a Bible word, or in the church it's like a cuss word.
Oh yeah.
So what would you give an example of what submission looks like? If someone says, well, what does that mean? How do you submit? Give me just one example of how you submitted to his authority.
When he makes a decision, whether or not I may agree with it or not, his decision is the one that came from the Lord.
Right.
And I have to trust in that. I'm not always great at that. And so the submission may not come immediately at first. It didn't come at first when we first became Christian. We didn't become Christian all of a sudden, woohoo, everything fell into order.
Right. No.
Oh no.
It takes time. It's a process.
It took time. And so I think my hardest thing was not to devalue your decision. Like he would make a decision and I would start picking at it. Well, are you sure that's the right one? Or have you thought about this? I mean, is the garbage can the right color?
We don't want to be Delilah.
Right. And so having to say, no, he made the decision and I'm not getting down on my knees and kissing his feet for it, but I'm going, you know what? He made the decision. I'm going to go with that.
Right.
And he's the one who's accountable to the Lord.
Yes.
So I figure that covering.
And Paul, did that change your perspective about the decisions that you had to make? I know being a leader, it's natural to be in charge and I have to make decisions all the time.
Sure.
It's not a big deal. But how did this one differ?
I think there is I don't know if this is just me, I think there's a tendency for men who are believers to want to cede a lot of their spiritual authority over to their wives. In terms of leading prayer, who is responsible for being the model for our children, what are our interactions at church. It is very comfortable for men to say, my wife's got that. So when Lisa talks about submission, what that prompted me to do is and I have heard this message before, gentlemen, stand up and be the spiritual leaders in your own house.
Yes.
Your job is to be the defender, the provider, the spiritual authority, and it is my covering that covers our kids, covers my wife. Be a leader.
Right. And
I'm grateful that Lise mentions this, because that was something that really challenged me when we started our journey with the Lord. Just really briefly, the thing that started this was Lisa being invited to a Bible study program outside of Red Robin that we had walked into one night for dinner. A lady said, "You look like you're new in town. Would you like to come join us for this?" And Lisa goes, "Okay."
How do you look new?
I think it's because we had Alaska license plate, so
okay,
we were out of place.
Okay.
Probably, and we just, I guess we didn't look Southern enough.
Yeah.
But that really started this journey. So in our walk with the Lord, Lisa went first.
Same here.
Yeah,
Same here.
And I saw what was going on, and I still remember the day we were baptized. Lisa had set it up on the calendar to go in and do that. And I was sitting at home. I was working on a paper for school, and I had walked to the front door, and literally a lightning bolt hit in our front yard.
Literally?
Literally, like 15 feet from where I was standing. It's the one that you hear it and feel it before you see it.
Wow.
And I just took that one to say, okay.
Oh yeah, I'm doing this.
That was
a sign.
That was a sign. So when we went to be baptized, it was, and I didn't tell Lisa. I said, "All right, I think this should be a 2-for-1 kind of thing."
Yeah, I was like, "What?"
And she was like, "Really?"
This is the Lord. No, it was lightning.
But that was the start of the journey, and spiritual authority and prioritizing my relationship with the Lord is one of the things that I grew into. That took a while. And I would say, especially for the gentlemen who are listening to this, as the head of the household, you need to establish what your priority is. And there's a lot of research on the secular side that talks about priorities, and how that's a myth. You can't divide your priorities and your attention and your focus among 15 different
There's no
areas.
such thing as multitasking.
Absolutely not. You have to focus on one thing, two things, three things. And the ability of the human brain to process that and go beyond that is limited. So, for the men out there, relationships are something you need to work at. Being a good husband, a good partner, a good spouse is something that you need to take very seriously. And don't think it's just going to happen. I mean, this is something that we grew into.
Yes.
You
worked at. You were intentional about.
Certainly. I mean, we've been married since 1997. So if I do the math, coming up on 23 years. Yeah. Sorry, I'm really bad with that. But the success, the position, the blessings that we've had didn't happen overnight.
Right.
This is something that we've had to work at, that we continue to work at every day.
Well, you started, when did you decide we needed to start praying together at first thing in the morning? Because that was something that we'd always heard people talk about, but we just never took that step. But you came
about 4 years ago.
And started saying, let's start praying together before we go to work.
Yes, because with the morning routine, getting the kids out the door, and I had to drive the kids to school before they got driver's licenses. And it was very, okay, get the kids fed, get ready for work, get everything done, out the door, boom. Now let's take a step back and establish who's
priorities again.
Right.
Where does the authority, who has authority over
Showing
our lives?
them.
Yeah. And it's, for the kids, it's modeling behavior,
Exactly.
which is one side of things. But more importantly for us, it's submitting our plans, our goals, what we want to do, making sure that those are in sync with what our Father wants for us and He wants us to do. And that really changed the way our daily life goes. It changed the way I think we look at the day.
It does.
And again, it changed our relationship with each other and with the people in our lives.
You know what I love about what you guys are sharing is because, you know, we're all a military couples. You guys are all active duty, and as you've been active duty, Lisa, and now you're a civilian. I think, what would you say when I think about when people are new and they're airmen and they're just starting out, and you know, they don't understand submission, they don't understand order, but they do it at work. What I love about what you guys are saying is that basically the things that you're doing at work, that you give all your time, your energy to, give that same amount of attention to your relationship with your spouse and your relationship with your children. And as women, let's not find our identities in our careers, but to realize that our children and our marriages are going to leave a legacy that when we're gone, because that's one of the things I remember listening to Focus on the Family and realizing that, wait a minute, my career is important, but it's not eternal. Mm-hmm. You know, so I made the decision, and when I listened to you, Lisa, I think the greatest step of your submission to your husband was when you left your career. Because that's you saying, I trust you to be able to take care of us financially and spiritually. Mm-hmm. And I love what you said about you gave him the time to grow into a leader. I don't think that we understand that men don't just wake up spiritual leaders. We have to give them the time and the prayer and the patience to let them become that. And so I think a lot of things you guys are saying are going to really, if people would just listen and apply, is that spiritual authority is something that we have to make our priority and surrender to, and not think like it's going to just, it's not magic. It's not like a lottery ticket. And so I love that.
In January of 2009, we were asked to write down one word that was keeping us from growing closer to the Lord. Keeping us from growing closer to the Lord. So I wrote self-reliance, because I was still very reliant on myself. And you wrote?
I wrote comfort.
And within how many weeks after we wrote that?
Oh, so that was January 2009. About 2 months later, my boss called me into his office and said, hey, I need you to go to Afghanistan. The Air Force needs you to go to Afghanistan.
For a year.
Yes.
And it was very much
out of your comfort zone.
Completely out of the comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And if you looked at it on paper, from March 2009 to April 2010 should have been the most difficult year of our lives, because I was in Kandahar, Afghanistan. Tyler, our son, was in first grade. Our daughter was getting ready to go into kindergarten in 2009. Mm-hmm. And it turned out actually to be one of the best years of our lives in terms of growth, in terms of our relationship. Facebook and Skype are wonderful things.
Yeah.
It was a priority for me that I would, because of the time zones and the way stuff was off, I could actually eat breakfast with the kids. I'd be coming off my work shift.
We had them up on Skype.
Yeah, I was up on Skype. So our daughter's first day of kindergarten, there's Dad,
still there.
Still there, grinning in his uniform, sitting in the middle of a dorm room in Afghanistan.
But I so thank the Lord that we had that year, because I learned to submit. Mm-hmm. I learned to submit to the Lord. I think Grace sent me to my prayer corner more that year than any other time. She's like, Mama, you need to go pray. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what prayer was. We'd only been a Christian for just over a year. Right. And so this was a brand new journey for us, and learning to I had to rely on other people for help. I had to ask for help, which I'm not very good at asking for help.
Especially when you're self-reliant.
Exactly. And the Lord broke that off of me. And broke the comfort that Paul was undergoing. And when he got back to the States and we reunited, it took our relationship to the next level.
Yeah.
And so, yes, on paper it should have been awful, but it really was a blessing. And I didn't have to do laundry for a year.
Yeah.
It was great. Sorry. Or cook dinner.
Oh, I love
but
that.
That's just on the side.
That was just the benefits.
This has been an awesome conversation. And as we come to the end of it, I wanted to leave with a question to you guys. You said early in your marriage, I had something similar happen to where I was a newlywed in Minot, North Dakota. And a guy told me, hey, if you want to have a good marriage, all you got to do is work on your marriage. And I looked at him and I said, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. How do you work on your marriage? So I'm going to ask you guys, based on all the things that you said, you gave some good information already, what is something that you can leave our listeners with that to help them put some actionable things to working on your marriage and your relationships? What could they actually practically do? What could you kind of advise? One last thing that you could give them to say, this is what you can do.
So this has been a big one with various pastors, and it's come up in the secular, a lot of secular literature, which is habit tracking, the power of small change over time. I would say this in terms of building your relationship. Look at your schedule and block time every day, 30 minutes for communication. Whether you're walking, whether you're driving somewhere in the car, block that time out so you and your spouse have time to talk. And it doesn't have to be about deep issues. How was your day? What's going on in your life? Gentlemen, do not try to fix problems that are presented in the conversation.
Listen.
We don't want it to be fixed. We just want to rant.
That's thank you, Renee. That's one that I have learned over time. But seriously, take that time to spend in communication. Put your phones away. Don't worry about sports. Don't worry about what's going on at work. Or talk about it. Just so you get a feeling for what's going on, what's important. It's a time to be honest. It's a time to talk about how you're doing. It's a time to talk about your hopes, dreams, fears for the future. And when you work on that communication, everything will get better.
Wow.
Just 30 minutes. If you can give it 30 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, just start somewhere and it'll grow. And you will be amazed what happens over the span of your marriage with that open communication.
It's the time value of money, we say. You know, you invest money and then eventually it grows exponentially. It's the same thing with time you spend with your spouse should be protected. Turn off the TVs, put down the phones, put down the technology. Even if you can just sit next to each other at the kitchen table and have a conversation, you have to go to your closet. We've had many conversations in our closet when our kids were little because that was the only space we had, privacy. Start small. I'm all about one thing. And so if you can pick one thing this year to work on, and to grow your relationship, protect that communication time. Schedule a date night. Let the kids go with somebody so you can go out to dinner or go for a walk or just have a real conversation and not a text conversation.
Yes. So I have a question.
Okay.
My question is, you said that they asked you a question, what was one thing that was keeping you apart? So I want to ask you, what is one thing that is keeping you guys together?
Your ravishing good looks.
That's not the conclusion.
That's what started this.
That's what started it.
Yeah.
Attention podcast listeners.
Sorry, we actually humor.
Yeah.
Humor. There been many of a time where honestly he just makes me laugh. And what has been the glue besides the Lord is it's just life. You just have to not take everything so serious. And you mentioned what would we say to our younger selves? Just laugh. It's okay to have fun and to be goofy and to not be so serious about everything. And honestly, that would be our one thing is just we have fun.
We do.
Yeah, and you're pretty funny. I'm not. But he is.
Okay.
It's okay. You got to have one person that's funny, one person that's serious.
Exactly.
So we thank you guys so much for sharing this time with us and our listeners, and we really, really appreciate it. Gil and Renee Beaver's over 30-year relationship is the genesis for the Rich Relationship Podcast, which is designed to empower individuals with the tools, principles, and the community needed to unpack ourselves, our past, and our preconceived notions associated with relationships.
Let's get empty and grow together so that our lives will be filled with love and healthy, rich relationships.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your investment in time. Remember to subscribe to the show and hit the notification icon to be notified when new episodes are posted on the podcast platform that you're listening from.
Or you can always find us on our website at richrelationshipsus.com or our YouTube channel, Rich Relationships with Gil and Renee. If you found this podcast helpful or you think it could help someone that you know and care about, please pass it along and share it with them.
And also, you can always send your questions and comments to richrelationships.us@gmail.com. This is a weekly podcast, and the new episodes are going to be posted on Monday by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.